The scariest part is how normal this used to feel. 33 most insane punishments that were totally legal in history. Today, 33 dumb punishment mistakes people keep making, then acting shocked. Like getting branded for theft or locked in stocks for gossip. Stay for number 33, because the last one is insane. Witch ducking tests where floating meant you were guilty. One splash in the pond could ruin your entire life. In 17th century England, witch hunters like Matthew Hopkins pushed it. The logic was cruel, pure water rejected anyone allied with evil. Sink, and you were innocent, but you might not breathe. Float, and towns claimed proof, then rushed you to court. In Salem, Massachusetts, people still whispered about dunking tests too. Neighbors watched, betting on bubbles like it was theater. Today it sounds absurd, yet it felt like simple procedure. 2. Trial by ordeal with hot iron and boiling water. Your verdict could be hiding inside a blistering bandage. Medieval Europe used ordeals when courts wanted God to decide. A priest blessed the iron, then the accused carried it. Others plunged a hand into boiling water to grab stone. After days, officials unwrapped wounds and searched for clean healing. If it looked good, you walked free, celebrated as chosen. In 1215, the Fourth Lateran Council pulled clergy from ordeals. Without priests, the system collapsed, and jury trials filled gaps. 3. The pillory publicly locked in place for days of shame. You could not hide when the whole market became your jury. In London, the pillory nailed offenders at street-level humiliation. Daniel Defoe stood there in 1703, surrounded by jeering crowds. His crime was political pamphlets, not some dramatic violent act. Hands and head were locked, so even rain felt personal. Sometimes people threw eggs, sometimes they threw sympathy instead. In Bristol and Boston, similar frames turned punishment into a show. The twist is, officials liked it because it was cheap. A sentence ended, but the memory stuck to your name. 4. The stocks, hands, and feet trapped in the town square. One small mistake, and your feet became public property. Stocks sat on English village greens and New England commons. A constable slammed the wooden boards, trapping ankles and wrists. In Boston, they parked them near meeting houses, like a warning sign. Time moved slowly while flies landed and strangers offered advice. Kids treated it like a carnival game, testing your patience. Some towns punished gossip, swearing, or skipping church services. When weather turned, cold boards became part of the sentence. You were released, but everyone remembered exactly where you sat. 5. The Scolds bridal metal mask, used to silence women. The punishment looked like a mask, but it was a cage. In Scotland, they called it the branks, a Scold's bridle. Town officials in Edinburgh and Glasgow used it on loud women. They marched the wearer through streets, chained like a walking sign. Sometimes the mask had horns or a long nose for ridicule. Men could be punished too, but women were the usual targets. It punished noise, not harm, which makes it feel extra petty. Imagine being punished for talking in cities built on debate. 6. Ducking stool punishment for scolds accused of gossiping. A chair on a beam could turn gossip into a dunking. English towns used ducking stools on women labeled scolds. The chair swung over rivers like the Thames or local ponds. Crowds shouted as if it was entertainment, not punishment. Some women fought back, spitting curses when they surfaced coughing. In colonial America, towns copied the idea, especially in Virginia. The trick was humiliation. The water was just the loudest prop. It was social control with a splash, and everyone knew it. 7. The Kangi giant, wooden collar used in imperial China. Your neck could disappear inside a wooden frame wider than doors. In Ming and Qin China, the Kangi punished many crimes. Magistrates locked it around your shoulders, forcing arms outward. You could not eat easily, so family brought bowls to your lips. Officials posted your name and offense on the board above. In Beijing markets, people stared, reading the sign like news. Some prisoners collapsed from heat, still trapped inside the collar. The punishment was slow theater, designed to teach everyone compliance. It is hard to forget a law that turns bodies into billboards. 8. Japan's criminal face tattoos that marked you for life. One theft could literally change your face for the rest. In Edo period Japan, authorities used penal tattoos called irezumi. Instead of prison, a mark announced you as a criminal. Different regions used different symbols, like a cruel postal code. In Hiroshima, a dog tattoo could appear on the forehead. Shikuzen used lines, Takayama used dots, and Hizen used crosses. Even after release, shopkeepers spotted you instantly in crowded streets. Some people covered marks with decorative tattoos, birthing a twist. The punishment followed you silently, louder than any court record. 9. Public whipping posts used as routine local justice. A wooden post could turn a sentence into a street performance. Whipping posts stood beside courthouses in England and colonial America. In Massachusetts Bay, officials punished theft, lying, and petty violence. The constable tied wrists high, making every movement visible. Neighbors gathered, pretending it was justice, but watching for drama. Sometimes a minister preached nearby, turning pain into a sermon. In Virginia, the post often sat near the county courthouse green. The real twist was social. Punishment worked because everyone attended. When the crowd left, the post stayed, ready for the next. 10. Penal treadmills, making prisoners walk all day for nothing. Prisoners walked for hours, yet got nowhere, literally and legally. In 1818, engineer Sir William Cubitt promoted the prison treadmill. British prisons like Brixton installed giant stepping wheels along walls. Inmates climbed wooden slabs, gripping rails, staring at blank brick. Sometimes it powered grain mills, sometimes it powered absolutely nothing. Guards timed the pace, turning fatigue into an exact schedule. If you slowed, you fell, and the wheel kept moving. Victorian reformers called it discipline, but prisoners called it torment. It is like exercise, except the goal was breaking spirits. 11. Debtors' prisons locked up until you could pay everything. You could owe money and still end up paying with years. In London, the Marshalsea prison swallowed debtors who missed payments. Charles Dickens knew it well because his father John was imprisoned. Families often moved inside, renting rooms from the prison itself. You could work, gamble, even drink, but you could not leave. Fees piled up for food and bedding, turning debt into quicksand. The Fleet prison ran similar schemes, practically a business model. Release often required outside help, so poor families stayed trapped. It punished failure, not fraud, which is why it stings. 12. Transportation to Australia for petty theft and vagrancy. Steal a handkerchief, and the ocean could become your sentence. Britain shipped convicts to Australia after the American Revolution ended. In 1788, Arthur Phillip led the first fleet to Botany Bay. Many prisoners were teenagers convicted for small theft in London. They spent months below decks, surviving storms, sickness, and boredom. On arrival near Sydney Cove, they built camps under strict guards. Some earned tickets of leave later, others vanished into hard labor. The fake out is it started as punishment, then became a colony. Thousands never returned, so the sentence rewrote family histories. 13. Sentenced to the galleys rowing warships in chains. A court could sentence you to the sea without leaving land. In France, under Louis XIV, criminals were sent to royal galleys. At ports like Toulon, Men were chained to benches in rows. They rode on command, muscles burning as drums set the pace. The ship smelled of tar, sweat, and cramped wooden boards. Some were prisoners of war, some were thieves, all were trapped. When sailing replaced rowing, many galleys became floating prisons instead. The twist was speed. The state wanted power, not rehabilitation. Even freedom later could not erase the years of oars. 14. Prison hulks rotten ships turned into floating jails. Your prison might be a ship that never planned to sail. Britain moored prison hulks on the Thames near Woolwich. Old warships were stripped, then packed with convicts in darkness. The air was damp, the decks leaked, and sickness spread fast. Guards rode out each day, treating the hulk like a warehouse. Across the Atlantic, the HMS Jersey anchored in New York waters. That hulk became infamous during the Revolution as a brutal holding ship. People on shore could see it, yet could not help inside. It was incarceration by neglect, dressed up as naval logistics. 15. Workhouses, where poverty itself became a legal offense. Being poor could land you in a place designed to hurt. England's poor law workhouses separated families to discourage relief. After 1834, parishes sent desperate people into strict indoor regimes. At Andover in Hampshire, inmates were made to crush animal bones. Investigators later found inmates gnawing marrow because rations stayed tiny. Masters ran them like factories, with bells, rules, and punishments. Children learned trades, but often learned fear much faster. Charles Dickens mocked workhouses, yet real boards kept funding them. The surprise is how bureaucracy turned hardship into official policy. 16. Outlawry declared outside the law anyone could harm you. One court order could erase your rights like chalk in rain. In medieval England, outlawry meant you were outside royal protection. Under Henry II's legal reforms, sheriffs could proclaim you an outlaw. Miss court too many times, and the writ came down fast. Your land could be seized, and neighbors feared helping you. People called it wolf's head, meaning anyone could attack without penalty. Outlaws hid in forests, sometimes joining bands on roads to York. The twist is, it was paperwork, not a battlefield, that killed. Reversing it required surrender, fines, and a judge's mercy. 17. Ostracism in Athens, exiled for 10 years by vote. A quiet vote could kick you out of Athens for a decade. Ostracism was a legal exile used in democratic 5th century Athens. Citizens scratched names on pottery shards called ostraca in the agora. No trial, no speech, just a pile of broken clay votes. Aristides the Just was ostracized after rivals turned popularity into fear. Later, Themistocles faced it too, despite saving Greece at Salamis. The exile lasted 10 years, but property usually stayed untouched. It was prevention, like ejecting a player before the fight starts. Athens called it safety, and the target called it betrayal. 18. Damnatio memoriae Rome erased your name from history. The state could kill you twice, first in life, then memory. Romans used Damnatio memoriae to erase disgraced leaders from history. After Emperor Geta died, his brother Caracalla ordered names removed. Stone inscriptions were chiseled blank, leaving weird scars in marble. Statues were smashed or recarved, like editing a portrait with hammers. Coins still circulated, so people saw the face, but not the name. Families hid busts indoors, hoping officials would not notice. The twist is the erasures made victims easier to remember. Every blank spot became a clue that power was panicking. 19. Forced to wear a scarlet letter for public humiliation. A single-stitched letter could brand you before anyone spoke. Puritan New England courts used clothing symbols to shame moral offenses. In Massachusetts Bay, adultery and fornication could mean wearing a badge. Neighbors stared during sermons, then gossiped outside Boston meeting houses. Some people sewed the symbol fancy, which annoyed judges even more. Ministers said it taught humility, but it mostly taught social fear. The curveball was permanence. The sentence ended. The symbol stayed. It is dress code as punishment, with no escape route. 20. Church penance, standing on a stool before the congregation. You could be forced to confess while everyone pretended not listening. Scottish Presbyterian kirks used the stool of repentance as public discipline. In Edinburgh, kirk sessions ordered sinners to sit high before sermons. The minister preached, then the offender stood, trembling, under stare. Crimes were often adultery, drunkenness, or fighting neighbors in alleys. Sometimes they had to repeat it for weeks, like a serial episode. Families sat below, feeling every whisper bounce off stone walls. The weird part is, it was punishment without bars or guards. It relied on community memory, the sharpest tool in the room. 21. The drunkard's cloak, wearing a barrel as walking shame. The sentence was basically a wearable barrel, turning you into furniture. In 17th century Newcastle, England, they called it the Newcastle cloak. Officials cut holes for head and arms, then shoved it on. Under Oliver Cromwell's Commonwealth, authorities cracked down on alehouses. The offender was paraded through streets, clunking like a walking keg. Travelers reported similar barrel punishments in Delft and The Hague. Samuel Pepys noticed it abroad, proving the idea traveled fast. The surprise is it punished drinking by forcing you to advertise it. Even sober later, you still remembered the barrel's weight. 22. Shame masks and muzzles used for public moral offenses. A mask could punish your personality, not your actions. In 17th century Germany, shame masks were called Schandmasken often. Metal cages shaped like pigs or donkeys mocked the wearer. Town guards marched offenders through marketplaces in places like Nuremberg. Gossips, liars, and drunkards became moving jokes for their neighbors. Some museums in Rothenburg ob der Tauber still display surviving examples. Once unlocked, the humiliation stuck longer than any fine. 23. Caged in iron for public display in town squares. Some sentences kept going after death, hanging you like a warning sign. In Britain, gibbets sometimes used iron cages to display criminals. After executions, bodies could be placed in cages beside major roads. The idea was simple: frighten travelers before they tried robbery. Winchester's Westgate Museum still has an iron cage linked to gibbeting. Locals saw the silhouette from far away, especially in winter light. Families avoided the spot, but kids dared each other to look. The twist was time. The display could last for years. Punishment became landscape, like a billboard nobody could ignore. 24. Devil's Island Penal Colony Sentence. In French Guiana, France could exile you to a tropical rock where time crawled. Devil's Island sat off French Guiana, part of the Salvation Islands. In 1895, Captain Alfred Dreyfus was sent there after a scandal. He lived under harsh rules, watched constantly, separated from almost everyone. Letters arrived late, censored, like messages passing through thick fog. The water penal colony nearby held thousands, and many died of disease. Decades later, stories like Papillon turned the place into pop mythology. The twist is, Dreyfus was later cleared, but years were gone. Devil's Island proved isolation can be punishment without a whip. 25. Bread and water diets ordered as official prison punishment. A prison menu could be part of the sentence, not an afterthought. Victorian Britain used bread and water diets to punish rule breaking. In places like Pentonville, officials tracked misbehavior with ration cuts. The loaf was plain, the water cold, and the cell silent. Days blurred because hunger turns minutes into heavy stones. Sometimes it followed a tiny offense, like speaking during work. Guards called it discipline, but doctors warned about weakness and collapse. Food became leverage, and that made every rule feel sharper. 26. Solitary confinement in total silence under the separate system. Silence could be enforced so hard it started to feel loud. In 19th century Philadelphia, Eastern State Penitentiary pioneered the separate system. Prisoners lived alone, worked alone, and even exercised behind high walls. A hooded escort sometimes moved them, so they never met others. The theory said solitude would produce repentance, like a moral reset. Charles Dickens visited and described the effect as slow mental pressure. Some inmates talked to rats or to cracks in the plaster. When doors finally opened, many people struggled to rejoin noise. 27. Public carting paraded through town, while neighbors jeered. They put you on a cart so everyone could watch you move. In early modern England, carting punished prostitutes and public nuisance cases. A constable led the horse through London streets like Cheapside. Crowds followed, laughing, throwing scraps, and repeating your name loudly. Sometimes the route ended at Bridewell, where punishment kept going indoors. The cart turned the city into a courtroom with moving walls. If you protested, it only fed the spectacle, like adding fuel. When the cart rolled away, it left a trail of stories. 28. Heresy dunce caps forced on the accused in public. A pointed cap could announce heresy before the crowd heard anything. In Spain, Inquisition processions sometimes forced suspects to wear tall cones. The hat, called a carroza, signaled shame during public ceremonies. It turned a theological dispute into a street costume everyone understood. In Seville plazas, crowds watched lines of penitents march slowly. Painted symbols on the cap hinted at charges and supposed stubbornness. Some people confessed just to lose the cap and the gaze. It was humiliation with theology painted on top, like graffiti. 29. Inquisition Sanbenito shame, garments worn long after sentencing. Your punishment could follow you home as a shirt everyone recognized. The Sanbenito was a penitential garment used by the Spanish Inquisition. At an auto de fe in Toledo, defendants wore it before officials. It often carried painted symbols, so strangers could read your supposed sins. Afterward, some churches hung Sanbenitos as reminders, like trophies. That meant your family walked past it every Sunday, for years. In Portugal, too, similar garments marked suspects of Judaism or heresy. The twist is, cloth did what prisons could not. Long memory. Even after death, the painted shame could still hang over you. 30. Finger stocks, tiny devices, used to punish petty crimes. For tiny crimes, the punishment focused on your fingers like a spotlight. Finger stocks were small wooden boards with holes for each finger. They appeared in English towns and Scottish kirks for petty offenses. A beetle locked your hands in, leaving you standing awkwardly. The pain was dull, but the real bite was public staring. People could walk by, count your fingers, and guess your crime. In some churches, it punished kids for laughing or skipping catechism. When released, your hands worked again, but your pride did not. 31. The crank machine punishment, turning handles for pointless hours. You could be ordered to turn a handle until your shoulders screamed. Victorian prisons used the crank as hard labor for discipline. In places like Brixton, a warder set resistance with a hidden screw. You never knew if it was heavy today or heavier tomorrow. The machine did nothing useful, which made the effort feel insulting. Prisoners joked it was grinding their souls, because nothing came out. If you complained, officials called it laziness and extended your punishment. It was a treadmill for your arms, with no destination.